This video is for people who are interested in applying for a family-based green card through the adjustment of status process in the United States. So there's a lot of misinformation out there right now. People are confused about whether they're even eligible to apply for green cards. There's this new USCIS policy memo that came out like 3 weeks ago that's really sending a lot of people into a panic. And so this video is to help anyone who's interested in applying for adjustment of status so that they understand what the process looks like. And, if you're doing it yourself, hopefully this will help put you in the right direction. Although it is not legal advice, these cases are fact specific, depends on the particular circumstances of your case. If you need any actual assistance, before you do anything, I do recommend speaking with an immigration attorney. Okay, so let's start by discussing the minimum requirements for adjustment of status. The main requirement if you're doing a family-based adjustment of status in the US is you must have entered with a visa or parole. And there are some exceptions to the visas. For example, if you entered as a crew member with a crew member visa and you actually were a crew member, you're probably ineligible to adjust status in the United States. If you entered on a J1 visa that was subject to the 2-year residency requirement and you never departed the United States, you're probably not eligible for adjustment of status, at least not through a family petition. And if you're out of status, you've overstayed, your adjustment of status must be based on an immediate relative category. There are 3 immediate relative categories: spouses of US citizens, parents of US citizens where the child petitioning for the parent is over 21, and children of US citizens where the child that's being petitioned for is under 21 and unmarried. Every other category of petition is called a preference category petition, and you cannot be out of status. You must be in a valid non-immigrant visa status when you file it, and there must be a visa available with a current priority date on that category. If you don't know what that last sentence meant, you need to speak with an immigration attorney before you end up filing an adjustment of status and placing yourself in deportation proceedings. All right, so next, let's go through the different forms that you will need to be filing. A big question I get is, hey, can't I file the I-130 online? It says on the website I could file it online. What about the I-485? What about the I-765? The answer is no. If you're doing a one-step concurrent filing where you're filing the I-130 and the I-485 in one package, you should not be filing either of those online. You can, in theory, file the I-130 online, but I don't recommend it because you're going to be filing the I-485 via paper. You're going to be physically mailing it off to a USCIS processing center, and it will delay the processing times doing it like that. You will save $50 filing the I-130 electronically, but I don't think those $50 are worth the additional delay and sometimes problems that are caused when your cases are not consolidated and you end up experiencing really long processing delays. And just a quick note, the I-485 can only be filed online for employment-based categories. So anyway, you need to be filing this as a paper filing. That's how I do it. And in fact, I have a couple of these right here that I'm going to be filing this week. All paper filings that we sign and we submit directly to USCIS. Okay, so the basic forms you need, and let's talk about a marriage-based adjustment of status because that's what we focus on a lot of our practice on. You're gonna need an I-130 petition filed by the US citizen petitioner, an I-130A filed by the immigrant beneficiary, that's the immigrant who's receiving the immigration benefit. The I-130A is only required for spouse petitions. If you're petitioning for a parent or a child, you don't need the I-130A. Next is gonna be the I-485, which is the green card application that the immigrant beneficiary is going to be filing. And then the final mandatory document in this package is going to be the I-864. That's the Affidavit of Support form. The Affidavit of Support is basically the US citizen's form that says if my immigrant spouse or immigrant family member falls below the federal poverty guidelines, if their income drops below this, I acknowledge that I'm going to be financially responsible in some sense to maintain them at that minimum federal poverty guideline. The immigrant can actually sue you to enforce that, by the way. And there is actually a guy on YouTube whose entire business is enforcing the I-864. All right, now there are two optional forms you can also file. One of them is the I-765 application for employment authorization. A big question I get with this form is, what's the category? On the form it asks, what's the category? I would say C9. That's for a pending adjustment of status application. One quick note, I'm not sure these are still getting approved. I filed like 100 applications in the last 6 months based on marriage-based adjustment of status, and I haven't had a single C9 EAD work permit approved since like October 2025. I reached out to my network of other immigration attorneys and they all reported the same thing. These C9 EADs appear to have just died towards the end of 2025, and it's not something a lot of people are talking about. The other form that's entirely optional is the I-131. Application for advance parole. This is the temporary travel document that lets you travel internationally while your green card application is pending. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that traveling on advance parole is incredibly risky. And by the way, this form costs an extra $630, probably a total waste of money. I strongly discourage my clients today from filing this form unless they understand that they might be denied re-entry. Let's discuss this for a minute because it bears repeating if you haven't seen my other videos. When you file the I-131, first of all, the processing times on it seem to be longer than a year, and most people will get their green card application approved before that. So it ends up just not getting approved in a timely fashion. Once you get your green card, you can travel internationally. You don't need this temporary permission to travel. But let's say it does get approved in a timely fashion, where you actually want to use it to travel internationally. Super risky to do that. There's a really good chance, like I would put it at well over 50%, probably well over 75%, that you could be denied re-entry into the United States. We just got a phone call the other day from some guy who traveled on advance parole, and while he was trying to reboard the plane to come back to the United States, the airline informed him that customs officers, the CBP office, informed the airline that this person no longer has permission to re-enter the US. CBP took proactive measures to prevent this guy from boarding a plane from halfway across the world. So he didn't even have an opportunity to make it to the US airport. And by the way, he had a pending adjustment of status application through a US citizen spouse. But let's say he did board the plane, or like he flew to Canada and tried to come in through like a border crossing. The customs officers have ultimate discretion when it comes to re-entry on advance parole. And right now, the climate is such that discretion is unlikely to be exercised favorably. Okay, so let's get back to the adjustment of status filing. Hopefully you don't apply for advance parole. If you do apply and you plan on using it, talk to an attorney. Get some recent experiences that the attorney has so that you can make the most informed decision before you actually leave the United States. Okay, so you have your forms ready to go. How do you make the government filing fee payment? You should use form G1650. Do not use the credit card authorization form. Use the ACH debit card authorization form, which is the G1650. The reason is, when you file it based on a credit card authorization, you have to fill out a different authorization form for each of the immigration applications. You're gonna be paying $675 for the I-130, so you're gonna have a separate G1650 for that. $1,440 for the adjustment of status application for most people. There are some exceptions, especially if you're a minor under age 14, and $260 for the work permit application if you decide to apply for that. So you would be preparing a separate authorization form for each of these. If you use the credit card authorization, then what's gonna happen in some scenarios is your credit card company is gonna end up denying some of the transactions because they are rapidly charged 3 fees in rapid succession that are pretty large transactions. And we've seen a lot of scenarios where people pay with credit cards, we mail out their package, and 2 months later, we're wondering what's going on. We never received receipts showing that these cases are pending. Our client was never scheduled for fingerprints. And what happens is we received a whole package back in the mail with a letter from USCIS on top saying your credit card payments were declined. It wastes 2 months unnecessarily, and in this climate, that's super dangerous. There are some other optional forms you could file, like you could file a form to receive text message and email notifications once USCIS receives the package. I do recommend filing that. A big question I get is, do I need a separate one for each application? No, I would just file one for you and one for your spouse. Put them right under the ACH debit card authorization forms, but before the actual immigration forms. I also like to do all the immigration forms in rapid succession without putting any documents in between them. So for example, we start with the I-130 and then I-130A and then go straight into the green card application, the I-485. In between the I-130 and I-485, we don't put the marriage evidence, even though the I-130 requires it. We do all the immigration forms first, at least that's how I've been doing this for like over a decade. And then right after all the forms, we dump all of the supporting documents. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce certificates, tax returns, proof of citizenship, proof you entered legally, so typically a copy of your passport with the visa and the I-94, and then all the marriage-based evidence if it's a marriage-based adjustment of status. Those are the bare minimum documents we would file, and I might even be forgetting a few off the top of my head. In addition to all of that, you also need a medical examination. If you just Google like USCIS find a doctor, it'll bring you to, you can find the link to locate a civil surgeon for immigration purposes. You click that link, put in your zip code. This will show you all of the USCIS certified physicians offices near you. I would typically recommend calling like 2 of them just to see what their prices are. They will oftentimes tell you, we can't tell you what the price is over the phone because we don't know like what your vaccination history. Just ask, what is your base price if I don't need any vaccination, so that you can compare, do an apples to apples comparison. Some of these places will charge like $350, some will charge $1,000 for the exact same service, and your insurance will not typically cover this. It typically takes at least 2 weeks to get those medical exams. They're gonna give it to you in a sealed envelope. Do not open it. It'll say on it most of the time, do not open, for USCIS only. This is one of the only original documents you're gonna be mailing in your package to USCIS. I like to just loosely put the medical examination on top of the package. And by the way, the actual documents, like a stack of documents that you're gonna be mailing, don't staple them. You can use paper clips, but USCIS doesn't really like that. Like if it's really big, sometimes we'll just put a rubber band around the whole thing and put it in a flat rate box and ship it off. Sometimes we will put like one thick binder clip on the whole thing, but basically and don't put tabs on the side. They've specifically discouraged that in previous notifications on the USCIS website, that they don't want tabs, because as soon as they get the whole package, they open your medical examination, they remove your passport style photographs. You're gonna need 2 for the US citizen and at least 4 for the immigrant beneficiary, and possibly more if you filed the I-765 or I-131. So they'll take these documents and then they're gonna remove all the tabs that you submit. They're gonna remove all the binder clips, and then they're just gonna scan your whole package into their computer system. So all the effort you put into like neatly putting tabs was all for nothing. They don't care about that. After it gets mailed out, typically within like 3 to 4 weeks, you'll receive some receipt notices in the mail. You'll receive at least 1 for the I-130, 1 for the I-485. You won't get 1 for the I-864, and if you did apply for the work permit, the I-765, or the travel document, the I-131, you'll get receipt notices for those as well. You'll also probably get an access welcome letter with like a code that allows you to connect your online USCIS account with these pending packages. So in the future, you could just check your case status online through the website, and right before your I-130 interview, I also recommend logging in and uploading unsolicited evidence of your marriage if it's a marriage petition, to make the interview easier when you finally show up for the interview. 2 to 3 weeks after you receive these receipt notices, it's common to receive a biometrics appointment notice. This is for the beneficiary spouse or the immigrant that's receiving the benefit in the case, even if it's not a spouse, to show up to an application support center. They take your fingerprints to begin running background checks. They'll also take your photograph. This is the photograph that's going to be used on your eventual green card, and if you end up receiving a work permit, your work permit. But you know, I'm not holding my breath on work permits for these cases right now. A few months after that, sometimes as early as 1 month after that, you'll receive an interview appointment notice. At this point, you need to begin preparing for the final interview. At the final interview, you're gonna need to bring all of the original documents that you submitted copies of with your initial filing. You know, if you submitted a marriage certificate, birth certificate, copies of passports, any of that stuff. Now is the opportunity to bring the original documents. One of the things that the USCIS officer is going to do at the interview is verify that these documents are authentic and then hand them right back to you. You also need to make sure you bring updated evidence of your marriage if it's a marriage-based petition. I've done a lot of videos on this because I focus on marriage-based petitions. So if you need any assistance with that, you could always reach out to us. After the interview, the officer will typically say, we cannot make a final decision on this case right now. You need to wait at least 120 days for a decision. I just had an interview yesterday. They got rid of those 120 days because there was a recent USCIS policy memo that kind of throws everything into flux. We're still following these cases. I still have every reason to believe they're going to get approved because the policy memo isn't going to withstand judicial scrutiny. So we're still proceeding as normal. And a lot of our recent interviews haven't even mentioned the policy memo, although it is USCIS office specific. Some offices have been asking for additional questions at the end of the interview. If you watch my other videos that I've made on the policy memo, you can see what those questions are. And it's a good idea to prepare with your attorney on how to answer those questions before you attend the interview. I do prepare with all of my clients thoroughly before they attend this interview, just in case they are asked these 4 questions to maximize the opportunity for success in these cases. What we're seeing right now after the interview is if the officer was satisfied, you'll probably get an I-130 approval notice, which means the government believes your marriage is real. Or if you're petitioning for a parent, they believe it's your parent. If you're petitioning for a child, they believe it's your child. That family relationship is real. But then we're seeing delays on the I-485 approval, the green card approval. I've had some colleagues that have had approvals a month later in the past week. So the interview was a month ago, and in the past week after this new memo came out, they got approvals. That's promising news. I have some clients who've been waiting 2 or 3 months and we still have no idea what's going to happen with the I-485. Once you receive an I-485 approval notice, you could check the case status on it, and it'll typically say something like, okay, we're now producing the card, the green card. We've mailed it out after that. You can also find the USPS tracking number so you can figure out where it's going and track it on its way there. Once you get your green card, congratulations, you're a permanent resident or conditional permanent resident. And actually, you were probably a permanent resident for several weeks. At the moment the I-485 is approved, you can breathe a sigh of relief because you are now a permanent resident, which with way more rights and privileges than you had beforehand. All right, guys, so I covered a lot in this video because I'm passionate about these cases. I really like these cases. People are really scared about this new memo that came out. The TLDR here is, don't worry about it. It's all gonna be okay, especially if you've been a contributing member of society. If you need any assistance with a family-based immigration matter, adjustment of status in the US, or consular processing abroad, I handle these cases day in, day out. I'm happy to consult with you, even if you want to do it yourself and you need some guidance, you have a couple questions before you file it, or if you're not sure and you want to talk to an attorney and have the whole case handled for you so you don't need to worry about it. The first step would be to reach out directly to me by scheduling a consultation. You can find the link in the video description below. And if you got any value out of this at all, the big favor I have to ask is please subscribe to my channel. It will really help us grow, and it'll help this video get in front of more immigrants who could receive value from it. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time for another video.